So in this installment, we're going to talk about the Shannon Morris affray. See, back in the old days, I used to call them affrays. They were very gentlemanly. Today we call them shootings or gunfights or whatever, but they used to call them affrays. In 1859, Shannon, who started and owned the newspaper in Visalia. He was a publisher of the newspaper in Visalia, which was the Visalia Weekly Delta. He was very well liked and very respected locally and other places that he had lived and had done the similar things. I think he came to California in 1849 or somewhere around there, maybe 1848, but I think it was 1849. So whenever he got here and was in business and started the Visalia Weekly Delta, he eventually had an issue. We could call it an issue, but actually it's probably a lot more. Well, it was a lot more of an issue with William Governor Morris, and Morris was an attorney in Visalia. They ended up, it's not 100% sure where or what started it. Some people have said that it was over an election, and you choose one side, the other one chooses the other side. Politics. Others have stated that it started around trying to start a ferry, trying to bring a new company in town to start a ferry on the Kings River. That was like something seemed like it was closer than the one that was already there, which would undercut all the business of the ferry that was already in existence. So, regardless, any of that, all of that is well, let's just look at what happened. Somewhere around Saturday, September 15th, is the first thing I could find, where they had issues, they had words back and forth, and then they took to publishing their concerns about each other. And of course, Shannon had the Weekly Delta. I mean, he had the greatest voice. He could say whatever he wanted to say. He could print whatever he wanted to print. William Governor Morris, was able to publish things in other news entities, which was known as the Sun. There was just a lot of issues back and forth. And back then, it was definitely a lot more gentlemanly as far as the duels that would take place. So, anyways, in this September 15th, 1860, which was published in the Visalia Weekly Delta, Shannon is talking about a correspondence appears in the last issue of the Sun over the signature of Kuia, which deserves some notice at our hands. The mere mention of the author's name would be sufficient to satisfy this community of its falsity, but many of the country might be induced to believe that some person in the neighborhood of Woodville did actually write the foresaid article. When it was written in town by the great leader of the Douglas faction, William Governor Morris, the writer claims it is a Douglas victory. When the gentleman-elect disclaims an affiliation with the clique, the writer says truly when he says that the gentlemen contending for the office both equally qualified and both respectable gentlemen. His accusations against the land office and others making his election party test are untrue. Basically, they went back and forth. They started going back and forth. I'll slow this down so you can see, so you can stop it and read some of this. Here we go. Here's where he starts talking about the high words. Well, many of these party tricksters cry no nominations while they are attempting to force into office such men as will be subserve their uses, even though their candidate was pure and spotless. The very fact that the favorite of the firm of Morris and Brown would condemn him in the eyes of honest community. They just went back and forth. They were going at each other back and forth and published newspaper articles about each other. November 10th, 1860. It looks like Shannon had gotten a copy of a card signed by William Gouverneur Morris, in which the following language: I have endeavored to obtain satisfaction from Mr. Shannon for his personal abuse of me in his paper, but we have been unable to do so. After which follows copies of a portion of the correspondence. The second letter, purporting to be written by me, I never wrote, for the reasons that I could not write, but authorized by S.W. Beckman to write one of similar purport, of which he has failed to furnish me a copy. Basically grown children. And I'll slow this down so you can read through this, but he's just going back and forth, talking about Mr. Morris was informed of the fact through Mr. Beckham and requested to wait until such time I could have full use of my hand. There was an issue where somebody delivered a letter to him, and in it he says that he hurt his hand. I think he punched somebody in the face is what it was. But he's stating that my hand is hurt, and so we have to wait till we can have it out. That answer has, from Mr. Beckham, that answer has never been given by Mr. Beckham for the reasons stated above, that I have not fully recovered the use and strength of my hand. So, Morris sending Mr. Tate, they go back and forth. And I'll just slow this down so you can stop it and read the articles. And then here we have 1124, where they had the fatal affray. And this was published by the Visalia Weekly Delta by Shannon's partner, where he's clearing up a lot of stuff that came out, because this was came out on the 24th, but I think the actual shooting took place on the 13th of November. I'm fairly sure it's the 13th of November. But this first section over here, he's clearing up a lot of stuff that got printed in other papers that wasn't true. A lot of other papers were reporting, they were blending the first story of the fight where Shannon hurt his hand with the actual shooting that took place. Once the affray took place, says here, on Thursday evening, Shannon entered the law office of W.P. Gill, Esquire. Gill was another attorney here in Visalia, where Morris was sitting. Shannon held in his hand a cocked pistol, and on entering raised the pistol, at the time saying, "Morris, are you armed?" Morris at once sprang to his feet and grappled with his opponent, Shannon being much the tallest of the two. Morris was unable to disarm him, and Shannon beat him severely over the head with the pistol, inflicting 9 severe scalp wounds. At first or second blow, Shannon's pistol was discharged accidentally. Remember, this was written by Shannon's partner, so maybe it's a little bit different. Maybe the truth was a little bit different. Sounds probably like Morris probably defended himself pretty good. Morris fell to the floor covered in blood, whereupon Shannon gazed upon him several seconds and then turned and left the room. Morris, however, sprang to his feet and, drawing his revolver, rushed out of the south door of the building as to intercept Shannon before reaching his office. The parties exchanged shots ineffectively. Morris then left his position and proceeded to the north side of the building and climbed up on the fence. And took deliberate aim and fired a ball, striking Shannon in the abdomen. At this instant, Shannon had raised his pistol, but lowered it without firing and put his hand on his wound and returned and walked to his office, where he died in about an hour and 18 minutes. So the two finally had their showdown. Shannon went and confronted him, and it turned into a grappling match where Shannon's firearm mysteriously fired by accident. Whatever. But he ended up dead. And Morris won the duel or the affray. So in 1860, November the 17th, 1860, the obituary was published. Again, he was very well liked in the town. I will slow this down so you can stop and read it. Here it is. He came to California in 1849. Started the Weekly Delta October 8th, 1859. So about a year later, he was dead. I like this part. That he had his faults is true, but to err is human and to forgive divine. Charity dictates that they shall repose with him in sepulchre, and when the passerby views that tomb, he will behold the grave of nature's true nobleman. Peace to his ashes. This was just an interesting. They republished this article. He wrote this and published this sometime before. It looks like I actually have it backwards, but it was. I'm not sure if he wrote it or if he just republished it. But it was talking about an editor of paper, how people. You know, you're in the public's eye, and you publish things that people don't like, and people will hate you. And it was very, ominous. It was an ominous thing that he printed this, because just a few short weeks later he would end up dead, shot in the streets, and died in his office. Here's the end of it if you want to stop and read it. This is a photo that I got. I clipped this out of, here we go up here, in Terry Oman's book, Wild Tulare County Outlaws, Rouges Rebels, where he has a good accounting of the affray that happened between the two. I just wanted to put that in there, where it's a good book. You should read it, pick it up. Actually, I saw it at Costco the other day. But that's actually what William Governor Morris looked like. This was a classified ad for his law firm. William Governor Morris and Brown, attorneys and counselors of law. His office was located on Court Street opposite the courthouse. Visalia, July 7th, 1860. Here is the classified ad for Gill. This is the office where the fight took place, and that was office on Mill Street. Just as Mill Street. Mill Street became Main Street. So originally it was Mill Street, and why was it called Mill Street? Because that was the street that the mill was on. This is what I found, and I'm not sure where I read the controversy over the ferry, but this was a notice where it's a notice I intend to apply for the Board of Supervisors, Tulare County, at their next special sitting for the license for the ferry across the Kings River, at or near the point where the present overland road comes to said river, near Eiley's dwelling, O.H. Bliss, November 9th, 1859. Notice is hereby given that it is our intention to apply to the Board of Supervisors of Tulare County, as some of the same can be heard according to law for an order to establish a public ferry and grant license for the same of the Kings River at the point about 5 miles above Whitmore's old ferry on said river, and where the overland stage road strikes the same. Simon, Taylor, Ira, H. Wood, Philip Curris, Morris, and Freeman, attorneys for petitioners, November 8th, 1859. That was his law firm that took this on. There was some mention of that at some point. Basically, Morris was taken he was set free, and it was considered as justifiable homicide, or whatever they would have called it back then. Later on, he went on to be a deputy U.S. Marshal. And then later, after that, he became a customs collector in Sitka, Alaska, where he died in 1844. There's a lot of controversy whenever he was being nominated to be a U.S. Deputy Marshal, where a lot of his things came back to haunt him from Visalia. Maybe at some point I'll do a follow-up on this stuff, but there is an article that was in, here it is, and this was in the Sacramento Daily Union, Saturday, January 8th, 1870. This is whenever he's being nominated to be a U.S. Deputy Marshal for California, and it is right here. William Governor Morris is not having a happy time. It is not at all as certain that he will be confirmed. Marshal Rand is here with record in case that occurred at Visalia, where a novel method was taken by some parties to compel the signing of a deed. The grantor was induced to sign the document by repeated hangings. I have not seen the record in this case and cannot therefore tell you its contents, but it is confidentially declared here that Morris was one of the parties to the outrage. Basically, this took place where, at the time, Morris was, I believe he was a notary republic type of a position. I don't know what translates now as what it was back then, but him and other people took this person. They had him in I think in the courthouse. They had him chained to the floor, and they were strung him up. And what they did is they hung him, and then asked him to sign away all of his deeded properties, all that stretched all over California, which included like a hotel somewhere in Riverside or something like that. And he refused, and then they hung him up again, and then eventually got him to the point to where he signed away all of his deeded property. So this all came up later on, where he was going to be confirmed to be a U.S. Marshal. At some point, it was not going to be confirmed, and then a few days later, then he was confirmed. And so, anyways, he went on to do all this other stuff. But he also went into the Civil War just after the Shannon Morris affray. He went on to serve in the Union Army in the Civil War, and then went on to other things. Maybe I'll do a follow-up on this at some point, but so it's it's an unbelievably interesting story, in the history of Visalia. All of that happened right there on Main Street, downtown Visalia.